Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. This is the 1 hour chart of silver provided by netdania.com. You can click on the link below. Now, we have broken below this 3250. You can see we had that 3250 support line. And as soon as we broke below that, we really had a rapid plunge. Now, I'm going to get into the volume in a bit because it was initially anomalous and now it's even stranger. But it was, at one point, it seemed to be on very low volume, and then the next, it was on extremely high volume, and then it's changed again. So let's go into the 1 minute, and you can see the two things that stand out here. This is our support line that was penetrated. You can see we had the big volume spike on this sell-off, and then we had the big volume spike on this sell-off. And I'm going to get into this anomalous data in a second here. But I wanted to take you over and have you look at the Japanese yen, because that's another chart that I've been following very closely here. If we scroll all the way out, actually we want to go out to the 1 hour. And if we scroll all the way out on the 1 hour, you can see we ran from about 76. This is when I started noticing that it had seemed to have bottomed, and I was expecting central bank intervention. Later on we got an admission that the Japanese were involved in printing up a bunch of money. Now, just recently, in the last week or so, you can see the massive volume that has come in. We also had massive volume come in today and this morning. If we go into a tighter view, you can see it. So you had this massive volume come in around 82. You can see we started to sell off. A massive volume came in, and then more massive volume. Now this is the dollar strengthening against the Japanese yen, and this is a very significant move. If you look at the time frame, we're looking at roughly February 1st to about halfway through March. So a month and a half, and we've run from a low of 76 to 84. That's roughly 8 points, and that's about 10.5%. So there's a 10.5% move of the dollar strengthening against the yen. If we go out to a daily time frame, you can see the size of this move now has actually, well, it's rivaling the size of the Fukushima intervention, and if it gets above the high there, it will actually have surpassed the Fukushima move in size, and not quite as rapid, but it's still very, very strong. If we go out to even a longer term chart, you can see that we have made a major change in the long-term downtrend. You can see that significant break up above that downtrend line, and we've rallied very strongly from there. We can put on the MACD to try to see how strong that is. You can see it's just above the zero line, a break just through the zero line. So this thing could actually have some legs. Where's it going to go? I don't know. It's anybody's guess. It looks like the extreme upper level for a long-term downtrend is all the way up here at 110. Now that would be amazing if we did that. The next level is probably going to be overhead resistance here at about 101 or so. So what is behind this move in the Japanese yen? My guesstimate on this is that it's pretty much just a big distraction. As I've been pointing out, the United States is very interested in having the rest of the world look at the weakness of other countries, whether it be Greece or the pig nations. Now we're seeing the emphasis on Japan and their financial state, and of course, in my opinion, the 800 bazillion ton elephant in the room is going to be the United States and the dollar and the petrodollar, of course. So, but we want to get back to that anomalous chart that we had in silver, and we want to look at this volume and the difference between this volume and the volume. This is a screen capture that I did earlier this morning, and it shows those two dramatic sell-offs, but the volume that was captured here is at about 8,000. You can see I pointed out that you see those two lines at 8,000 volume, and I was pointing out if you do 8,000 times the 5,000, you get about 40 million ounces. And the two lines above 8,000 here, that would equal about 80 million ounces, which is roughly 10% of world mine supply. I point out here sold in 10 minutes. The interesting thing though is that now when we look at our volume, we have only 1250. You can see on this spike here it's above 1250. The spike here it's above 1250, and over here it was 8,000. So what does that mean? I don't know. The volume figures have changed dramatically. Is that a different month they're looking at? And I can't say. The other thing that is very strange about this, if you look at the chart that I've got here, which is the current one, this is live. We're looking at it live right now. If we go back and look at the 9:30 a.m. print, and this is on the 1 minute, the 9:30 a.m. print is roughly just above this 1,000 mark here. And then you can see at 8:30 we had one that reached that 1,000 mark and two that went above it. So we have these three continuous in a row right here, and they're definitely higher than that 9:30 spike. Now if we jump over to the picture that I snapshot that I took, if we look here you can see that at 8:30 we barely got above 5,000 on this, and that's just one time, and we have two spots at 9:30 and a little bit after that went higher than this spike. So on this chart 9:30 has strength, 8:30 is weak, and we go over to this chart and it's the exact opposite. So what accounts for these anomalous volume behaviors, I can't tell you. A lot of my skeptics have said, critics have pointed out, you're just looking at useless data here. Now, I don't think it's completely useless because obviously this high volume lines up with this drop. Same here. But until I find the answers to these questions about what is going on with this volume data, I'm definitely going to be more skeptical about the volume data that I present. Now, the price is, well, we know the price is manipulated as well, but this is a true price as far as what the others are going off of, so this is going to be a true reported price. You can see we're rallying. Will this be the bottom? I can't say. I usually use volume gauges to determine that, and in this case I just simply can't. So if anybody has any more information, I'd love to hear it as to what accounts for this anomaly. Wanted to take you over to crude oil because that's going to be a big story here. This appears to be a lot of anomalous data as well. We seem to have lost a lot of data. Let's move into the closer time frame. Maybe that's just a glitch there. So if we look at the chart here, you can see that we've kind of topped out at this above this 105 level, and we hit 110. Even though we've broken through this downtrend line, we're having a little bit of trouble getting higher. We may bounce off and do something like that if it establishes support at that what used to be resistance line. That's quite possible. Now I wanted to take you briefly over to this Joseph Kony controversy. I really don't want to get too deep into it because there's a lot of conspiracies and a lot of theories being thrown around, and I just wanted to offer up some ideas. So the first thing I'm going to take you over to is a Wikipedia entry on Hans Morgenthau. Now, if any of you have done graduate studies in political science, especially international, well, in my day it was political science, probably today it's another major international politics or something like that. But Hans Morgenthau is the father of international power politics. This was at one point in time pretty much the only school amongst students of power politics. Today it's considered discredited, and I think we'll show you that it's actually not. But Morgenthau's theory was pretty simple. He's the founder of the realist school of the 20th century. This school of thought holds that nation states are the main actors in international relations, and that the main concern of the field of study is power. Morgenthau emphasized the importance of the national interest, and in Politics Among Nations he wrote, "The main signpost that helps political realism find its way through the landscape of international politics is the concept of interest defined in terms of power." So, to put that real simple so that people can understand it, what Morgenthau is really saying is that nations may give all kinds of public reasons for why they're doing things, but ultimately it's the national interest and it's a matter of power. So we have to keep that in mind, that people who come from this school basically view statements about foreign interventions for humanitarian purposes and things like that. That's pretty much something that the dum-dums or the naive or the sheeple, that's for them. But in reality, there are no foreign interventions or wars or actions at all that are taken by states for the purpose of anything but increasing that state's own power. So with that in mind, I wanted to jump you over to a map of Africa, and here is the Uganda, which is currently in the news. Now you have a lot of other countries that have been in the news. You've got the Sudan with Darfur, and you've got Somalia with, of course, Mogadishu. There's Liberia and the horrific dictator Charles Taylor. There's the horrendous activities in Sierra Leone, and Angola, of course. I want to look real briefly here at Zaire, because the atrocities, this was, I think it was President Mobutu was his name, or Sese Seko, I think was his name. Anyway, in the struggle for power over Zaire, it used to be known as the Congo, and was renamed Zaire by this president. There were battles, and there was the Hutus and the Tutsis, and Rwanda and Burundi. I think a lot of you remember that. But just to give you an example of some of the things that have gone on here, I'm just going to read a real quick snippet out of Wikipedia. This is the impact of the armed conflict in the Congo, or Zaire, on civilians. And this is just to give you an idea of the type of things that have gone on. In 2009, people in the Congo may still be dying, I guess this was written in 2009, may still be dying at a rate of an estimated 45,000 per month. And estimates of the number who have died from the long conflict range from 900,000 to 5,400,000. The death toll is due to widespread disease and famine. Reports indicate that almost half the individuals who have died are children under the age of 5. This death rate has prevailed since efforts at rebuilding the nation began in 2004. The long and brutal conflict in the DRC has caused massive suffering for civilians, with estimates of millions of dead either directly or indirectly as a result of the fighting. There have been frequent reports of weapon bearers killing civilians, destroying property, widespread sexual violence, causing hundreds of thousands of people to flee their homes, or otherwise breaching humanitarian human rights law. An estimated 200,000 women have been raped. Few people in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been unaffected by the armed conflict. A survey conducted in 2009 by ICRC in Ipsos shows that 76% of the people interviewed have been affected in some way, either personally or due to the wider consequences of armed conflict. In 2003, Sinafasi Makelo, a representative of the Mbuti Pygmies, told the UN Indigenous Peoples Forum that during the war his people were hunted down and eaten as though they were game animals. In neighboring North Kivu province, there has been cannibalism by a group known as Les Epicures, the Erasers, who wanted to clear the land of people to open it up for mineral exploitation. Both sides of the war regarded them as subhuman, and some say their flesh can confer magical powers. So here's just one story. This is just the Democratic Republic of the Congo. You've also got just the horrific stories from the neighboring Rwanda and Burundi. And these stories are in many countries. So the big question everybody's asking is, why Uganda? Why Joseph Kony? Why is this stuff involved? Now, a lot of the people who've been doing the debunking videos have found that there has been oil that has been discovered there, and I think the same thing is true of the Sudan, some of these others, and they are beginning to extract that oil. And I wanted to look at the larger question of that. A lot of people are saying, now we want to keep in mind Hans Morgenthau's theory of international politics, and that's that the reasons why countries do things is their national interest. It's not any silly thing like humanitarian causes. So in light of that, we need to ask ourselves the question, why would the United States have an interest in locking down these oil resources? Now, I was thinking about that this morning, especially in the case of hunting down this rogue warlord, Joseph Kony, and capturing him or exterminating or whatever they want to do, and how that's going to either help or hinder this operation. And the thing that I thought of, and especially when I was thinking of the war in Iraq that we have recently fought, that's not on this map, but a lot of people asked about the war in Iraq, and the ones who are, I would term, skeptical realists as far as international power, ones who have said, well, obviously the war was about oil. And the question would be, okay, well, if the war was about oil, then what is the benefit that we're getting from that oil? And the same question could be asked in Uganda. What is the benefit that we get? Is there any oil that's actually going to be extracted? Now, that's where I came up with the idea that I think that it's probably a bigger picture item than that. We're probably talking not about oil being extracted out of this continent, but more oil being shut down in this continent. In other words, if you remember the video that I did that was featured the article by Arnold Fekete, if you remember, the article was about the opium trade in China. And just to briefly remind you, the British ended up invading and taking over parts of China over this opium trade issue. If you remember, the Chinese had been trading for a long time and had accumulated so much silver that the vast majority of the silver was there, and the British came up with this clever idea of extracting that silver with the opium trade, because if they could get the Chinese to allow, or force the Chinese to allow the opium trade, then through the black market or whatever means, then the purchase of this opium, which the British supplied, would cause the silver to flow back in the other direction. So that was kind of a narco pound or narco sterling type of operation, whereas today we have the petrodollar operation. And just to remind you, the petrodollar operation is the principle that nobody in the world today can buy oil except in dollars. That was a system set up in the 70s with the cooperation of OPEC, and that system is still the current system, and that system is beginning to break down. So in my analysis, this Joseph Kony Uganda story and the Ugandan oil that's coming up in the U.S. starting to put humanitarian, quote-unquote, boots on the ground in Uganda is probably more of a petrodollar story than an oil story. My guess is that China and India and perhaps other countries are beginning to look at this very large resource-rich, oil-rich area of Africa and probably wanting to come in and develop it. If you remember, in Iraq, all of the contracts that Saddam had made, whether they were with China or Russia or anyone else, were immediately nullified when the United States invaded. It doesn't seem like the United States is in a big hurry to extract that oil, so perhaps the reason is a support of the petrodollar. So that's my speculation. That's the possible reason why we are seeing this story explode in the press, and then, of course, the debunkers on YouTube. Now, of course, as the oil price is high, that's going to be the opposite of what a lot of people think. This is actually a high oil price is a positive for the petrodollar, as long as that high oil price doesn't break the economy. If you remember, back in 2008, this collapse from 150 all the way down to 35 bucks. This is going to be a 75% reduction in petrodollar recycling, because there's 75% less money that has to be recycled into the dollar to buy this oil. So it's a very complex picture, but my guess is that what's going on in Uganda and with Joseph Kony, because of the theory of international power politics, I'm very skeptical that the reason that the United States is interested in intervening in Uganda is because of some rationale that we need to save the children, when children and women are being raped and slaughtered all over the African continent, and in much larger numbers in other nations. So back to the silver story, we have this anomalous volume coming in that shows on the 1 minute, and I have no explanation for that volume. I can't really even make predictions about whether we're going to form a bottom. It looks like we're going to roll over, so hopefully soon, if we do, I'm going to be able to cover some deals. I've personally been hoping that maybe the Moose would get below $30. That would take quite a move, maybe even a move to 27. And for you stackers, that would be nice to get that price. And we'll talk to you next time.